You're probably making 5 very costly mistakes to your real estate investment business. Mistakes that you can't afford, but we'll tell you about those in today's video and how you can solve them. I'm Jennifer Rulins, landlord, educator, advocate, and broker at One Focus Property Management. Today's video is all about 5 costly mistakes I hear landlords tell me every day that they're making. So let's not waste any time and get started. The first mistake I'm constantly hearing landlords tell me that they're making is that they're not vetting or running applications on tenants that they think that they know and trust. Now, these might be people that they know very well, friends or family. Sometimes these are just people that are associated with people that they know and trust. So what I'll hear is, oh, well, this tenant was known to me by my brother, or they're my mother's cousin. And those affiliations are giving that landlord a sense of security. I'm here to tell you that you cannot rent your property, period, end of story, without vetting the tenant, even when it's friends and family. Now, if you rent to somebody and don't vet them and don't ensure that they meet your qualification criteria, that is a risk that you take and it's a risk that you own. So you do get to choose that. But what I'm trying to draw your attention to today is that simply knowing and trusting someone, or knowing someone in common that you know and trust and is vouching for them, is not the same as qualifying and vetting an application for rent by the standards that are known to predict future behavior, like credit score, criminal history, landlord history, and the verifiable income that the household makes. Those are the criteria by which we should be choosing our tenants, not who they know in common with us. The second thing I hear people telling me all the time is that they're leaving the keys in the mailbox to the property during periods of vacancy. And I say leave the keys in the mailbox. Sometimes it's the mailbox. Sometimes it's under the mat. Sometimes it's hanging on a hook in an open garage or carport. A lot of times the properties are unlocked. So why are landlords leaving their vacant properties unlocked? Well, they're doing this for convenience. They're doing this so that they can send people to the property to do things on their behalf without them having to meet them there. I completely understand this reasoning, but it's 2022, folks, so I'm going to really beg you to invest in a lockbox, invest in a shackle box, something you can hang on a doorknob and securely give access to those that you choose. Here's why. Every single person who's ever accessed that property with your instruction now knows that it's unsecured, and any person who can see them do it also knows that to be true. Your neighbors are watching, and sometimes it's not your neighbors you need to worry about, but rather your neighbors' children. People who are looking for vacant properties to make trouble in. They're noticing. Please secure your properties. This is a real issue I see all the time. The third issue I'm constantly hearing about is that landlords are being asked to approve a tenant based on the fact that they can pay upfront in cash. So I'll ask, hey, did you run an application on the tenant that you moved in? And they'll say, no, they paid 3 months, 6 months, sometimes even 12 months cash upfront. And the landlord believes that they do not have a risk in that tenant because they're receiving this large upfront cash payment. There is nothing less true than upfront cash payments being a good thing for the landlord, okay? So there's nothing wrong with accepting your rent in cash or upfront, meaning before it is due. Nothing wrong. Where the mistake comes in, the costly mistake, is allowing the tenant's decision to pay the rent in that manner to decide whether or not you rent to them. So if a tenant would typically have to go through an application process, and when they present a large upfront cash payment, you typically don't do that as a way to avoid it, save time, or maybe the tenant requests. That is not okay. Do not skip that process. Tenants understand that landlords have a lot to do, that they're very busy, and they're looking to make it easy for you, particularly when they're not interested in following your process. I meet a lot of people who get into these situations where they've made a concession on their application criteria for something like an upfront cash payment and certainly live to regret it later. So I would encourage you to accept the money upfront if you like, but not in lieu of processing their application and determining whether they truly meet your qualifying standards. The fourth mistake I hear landlords telling me that they're engaging in regularly is using month-to-month leases as a way to mitigate tenant risk. So what I hear from landlords is that they're using month-to-month leases right off the bat when they rent to a new tenant because they're concerned that the tenant could become a problem of some kind, maybe not complying with the lease, problematic behavior, or not paying the rent that's due. So they believe that by having a month-to-month lease, they'll be able to more easily evict this tenant out of their property should they end up having a problem. Is this true? Yes. I mean, you could terminate it with 30 days notice. There are some restrictions on that, but yeah, you could terminate. But the problem is it takes at least a month for that notice to happen. And then if the tenant doesn't leave, you're on the same 6 to 8 week cycle in Pennsylvania to evict them out then for holdover tenancy. So I understand what landlords are trying to do with this. They're trying to mitigate the risk of a problem tenant and how long it might take them to handle it and get that tenant out of their property. Instead, I would encourage them to use typical year-long leases, qualify your tenants, and manage the property in a disciplined way. You're going to have much more success with avoiding and managing problem tenants by doing that than by just leasing somewhat indiscriminately and using the month-to-month lease as a way to control for that risk. So I'd like to see you have more continued tenancy with great tenants. That's the road to go down, not an escape hatch on the month-to-month lease should you need it. And the fifth mistake, and this is the biggest one in 2022 because we see what's happening in our economy and with inflation. But truly, landlords are afraid to renew the lease or raise the rent. And I talk to landlords about this every day. The number one message I have for landlords right now is to be very aware of where market rent is for your property. And if your rents are not at market, get them to market. This is your opportunity to raise rents to match the same increase in costs and expenses that you're having as well. Taxes, insurance, utilities, parts, everything is going up. You must be raising your rent. The fear, though, the reason why landlords don't raise the rent or renew the lease, the fear is that simply having the conversation will provoke the tenant to look elsewhere. They feel like, let sleeping dogs lie and let this tenancy continue. Is there wisdom to that? Yes, if you're interested in not having a tenant leave the property, that is an effective strategy. However, what I see a lot of people doing is doing this for years and years and years to where they have properties that are 25% or more off market. And this really becomes an issue when you need to get that property to market rent. Maybe because you have expenses, maybe you have capital improvements you need to make. Maybe it's time to sell it and the depressed rents aren't getting you the value that you need. You know, I see ads boast about long-term tenants, and long-term tenants are fantastic when they're qualified, compliant, and paying market rent. Otherwise, a long-term tenant and a short-term tenant aren't much different. So I'm asking you to have the bravery to talk to your tenants once a year, renew their lease, attempt to renew, at least update your terms, and get your rents at or closer to market. So I completely understand where you're coming from and wanting to treat tenants well who stick with you, but it's a very costly mistake to not take any action on those leases or those rents. I loved making you this video today all about how you can save money and lessen your risk by avoiding these 5 costly mistakes. So like always, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you want to know something about something else? Tell me. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and please share this with an investor friend of yours. We're really trying to make our messaging as useful as possible to landlords that are looking for this sort of education. All right, friends, we'll see you next time.